And welcome to a very special UK column interview. And it is now June of 2025. And this month is very, very important in the sense that 58 years ago, on June 8th, 1967, the USS Liberty, a very, very sophisticated ship, was in international waters. And what seemed to be a very quiet afternoon, right around 2 p.m. local time, was rudely interrupted, to say the least, by what turned out to be Israeli Defense Forces. And what ensued is to this day one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cover ups in U.S. military and naval history. Today, my guest is a survivor of that Israeli attack, unprovoked attack on the USS Liberty, Mr. Phil Tourney. There aren't a whole lot of survivors left. They just held their 58th reunion in Norfolk, Virginia. And I want to welcome you to the show, Phil, to explain this ongoing cover up and what happened on that fateful day. And I know you just had a recent reunion of the survivors, a brave bunch to say the least. Again, welcome to the show. And let's delve into this and sort this out.
Okay, it sounds good, Mark. Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here with you. I appreciate it, especially on behalf of the crew still alive. On June I think it was the 4th, we always made a trip to Africa. We went up and down the coast of Africa, picking up signals. It was very legal. Everybody did it. And we got emergency orders when we got to Abidjan to get to Rota, Spain, ASAP. We got to Rota, picked up 3 Marines, linguists, Arabic, Russian, and probably Hebrew. I'm not sure. I wasn't in that part of the ship. I was in ship's company, but then we picked up a NSA, CIA type guy, Alan Blue, and we were on our way to the Sinai. We got to the Sinai on the 7th day of June. The Israeli aircraft would overflow us over and over again. You could see the Star Davids on their recon planes, flying boxcar, DC-3, and smaller propeller aircraft. They would tip their wings, and we'd wave at them, they'd wave at us. And this was repeated on the 8th of June, early in the morning. They did that till about noon. And we thought everything was fine because we didn't get a destroyer escort like we were promised. We didn't get that. They wouldn't give us one. In fact, we asked twice, not me personally, but the captain and Commander Lewis asked for a destroyer escort because we were in the area of a war zone, 12.5 miles off the coast of the Sinai. At 2 o'clock, the attack began with unmarked Steer and Mirage jets. There were over 30 sorties flown over our ship, rockets, cannons, napalm, machine gun bullets. We got a message out, or I might add, every antenna on that ship was taken out except one because it wasn't tuning. So they're using heat-seeking missiles because the tuners would put off a wave and they would pick it up and hit it. So every antenna on that ship was destroyed within 3 seconds, as well as every watertight door and every fire hose above deck was destroyed in the first few minutes. Terry Haldebardier got a message out to the Sixth Fleet. In fact, it went as far as Vietnam, around the world. Rockstar, under attack by unknown jet aircraft. Rockstar. We thought it was the Arabs. I mean, our Israeli friends wouldn't do it. Surely they wouldn't do it. So we felt comfortable. It had to be the Arabs. It couldn't be the Israelis. And that that message went out about 12 minutes after the attack started. Rescue aircraft was sent from USS Saratoga by Captain Tully, and they were immediately recalled even before they hit the horizon by McNamara, Secretary of Defense. So they weren't going to send help to us, but They tried again from the Saratoga to the American. They both launched. Those aircraft were recalled again, this time by LBJ. Because I don't give a GD, a few dead sailors, I will not embarrass my ally. If we didn't know who was attacking us, how did he?
Yeah, let me interject there briefly just to dramatize some of those points. So you have the Israeli Air Force, Israeli reconnaissance planes prior to the attack flying over you. They knew who you were. You were clearly flying the American flag. It's during the 6 Day War. You're in international waters. You had to assume, you had no reason to believe otherwise, that when this awful attack began, which ended up killing 34 sailors and injuring 174, you had no reason to doubt that it was in other words, you had every reason to believe that it wasn't the Israelis, that it had to be the Arabs. And yet, like you say, you try to call in for help. The powers that be, the upper brass, even the president himself, LBJ, knew who it was. So, at what point in this awful attack, and you can be as graphic as you feel you need to be, at what point did you realize that this was indeed the Israeli Defense Forces?
Yes, the air attack lasted about 25 or 30 minutes, and they were gone. And as I said before, I mean, our ship was burning up with napalm, rockets and cannons, fires everywhere. It was a very dire situation. And then all of a sudden, we see Israeli torpedo boats. We thought they were there to help us, but no, they weren't. They were there to sink us. They fired 5 torpedoes at us. 2 went aft that I know of. Or the other 2, I don't know, but I know where one went. It hit right in the starboard side, blowing to bits 25 American spies, young men doing their duty for their country. And Israel just murdered 25 of them then. And that was a bad deal. I mean, that torpedo picked our ship up completely up out of the water, slammed back down on the ocean. We thought we were going to roll over and sink, but it just stopped by the hand of God. He was holding us up, and it just stopped. But that didn't stop the Israeli torpedo gunmen. Now this attack went on for an hour and a half. The torpedo boats, over and over again, they circle our ship, shooting and maiming and killing as many people as they could. And there was a lot of them. There was a lot of people very badly wounded. Some so badly wounded you could hardly look at them. That were on the weather decks. The probably about well, this attack lasted another hour and a half. The whole attack lasted 2 hours. If you can believe that. But we only had 3 life rafts left. They shot them all up or burned them up with the napalm. We only had 3 left. We were going to put our most seriously wounded in them. The Israeli torpedo gunmen would have none of that. And they shot 2 of our life rafts out of the water, took one aboard the boat as a trophy of the kill somewhere in Israel right now. It's hanging up as a trophy of the kill, murdering 34 American sailors. 9 were initially killed. And then the other 25, of course, with the torpedo explosion. And we didn't get any help from our government for 16 to 17 hours. They left us out there alone. They didn't even send a Piper Cub out there to see if we were okay. They didn't care. They were hoping we'd sink. They were hoping we'd sink and all die, but we didn't. Uh, I mean, those are war crimes. This is an act of war and war crimes. Our flag was always flying. We had 2 flags shot down, 2 brand new 5x8 flags. And then they put up the holiday colors. Francis Brown and Joe Metters put up the holiday colors, risking their lives to do that. 7x13 flag. You could see it for miles and miles and miles. They said that there was no identification on the ship, and they didn't know who we were. They thought we were an enemy ship. They thought it was the El Quasir, which was half sunk in Alexandria. It was an old horse transport. Now, the Liberty was a converted World War II cargo ship. It cost millions of dollars to revert that ship, get all the spy stuff on there and everything. And and but they tried to destroy us all. Like I say, our own government didn't come to help us till the next day. Doc Kiefer was operating all night. I helped him on one operation. Gary Blanchard, he was hit, and he was hit really bad. I was holding the lantern for the doc so he could see, and Gary said, "Hey, would you rub my feet? Take my socks off. My feet are hot." And I did. I went over to his uh, left side. He says, "You think I'm going to die?" Yeah, I said, I think you are, man. I'm sorry. I think you are. And Doc cut him open, and he was dead. We put him over to the side. Doc put a couple stitches in him, put him over the side, and that went on all night. Same thing all night.
A horrific experience. Now, the Israeli forces to this day, the Israeli government that oversees those forces, still claims, despite all that you described, and I've heard you speak before at conferences over the last 10, 15 years, they still claim it was a case of mistaken identity. But I also know there exists some cockpit audio where one of the pilots is saying, "Hey, this is an American ship," one of the Israeli pilots. Setting that aside for a moment, it's incredible to me, given what you described, that they can still try and claim that this was a case of mistaken identity when we both know better, as do your fellow survivors, and that evidently, and correct me if I'm wrong, they wanted to sink the Liberty and blame it on the Arab forces during that 6-day war in the Mediterranean. That was the evident goal, correct?
Yes, that was the goal, Mark. And we were probably set up a year in advance, to have this happen. It was all pre-planned. They wanted to sink our ship, blame it on the Arabs, and get us into nuclear war. We had SAC aircraft on the way to come bomb Cairo even before we were attacked. The aircraft were in the air. The aircraft were in the air even before we got attacked. So Lyndon Johnson, Levi Eskol, the prime minister of Israel, and a handful of others in both governments did this, and to get us into World War III. That was the whole plan. They wanted all of it. They wanted all the land. What's going on now in Gaza wouldn't be happening right now if our ship would have sunk. They'd have taken it all then. With the help of the United States, they'd have got it all. So we got all the wounded off, most seriously wounded. We were in a skeleton crew. We were 2 days out to sea, headed to Malta to get the ship repaired with a 40 by 40-foot hole in it. I mean, so many rocket holes and things. It was over 821 rocket holes, cannon holes, over 5,000 armor-piercing bullets in our ship, napalm burning us up, and nobody come to help us. 2 days out to sea, after we got all the wounded off, Admiral Isaac Kidd and his JAG officer, Captain Ward Boston, came aboard. They got us in small groups, interrogated us. Yeah, see, took his stars off, Mark, threw them on the stainless steel table. So I'm just like your dad. I want you to tell me exactly what happened, what you saw, and everything. We did. I asked him, how come you didn't come help us? How come we didn't get any help? They shot our life rafts up. Flag was flying. It was unmerciful what they did to us. Unmerciful. The torpedo boats finally took off, and then here comes the helicopters with troop carrying people in it, our Marines, to finish us off, scuttle down, use a rope or a ladder to get down our ship, kill us all. And then they just left. I don't know why they left, but they did, by the grace of God, I hope. Or the gig was up. They already admitted, hey, we did it. We're sorry. Whatever. But mistaken identity, Admiral Kidd interrogated us, as I said before. He says, I'm going to tell you guys something right now. Don't you ever repeat a word you just told me to anybody. Your parents, your family, even your shipmates. Do not talk about it. If you do, the penalty will be prison or worse. He says, you know what worse means? Of course, we knew what worse means. It means death. They're going to kill us if we said anything. I didn't say anything for 18 years until I read an article by Master Chief Stan White. Uh, then I got active, and I haven't shut up since for the last 42 years.
Let me ask a really important question there for clarity. If I'm hearing you correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what they did to you, so heinous, so, as you say, unmerciful, merciless, it sounds to me like that because they did it, as bad as it was, a much larger war did not happen. Am I hearing that correctly? Those bombers that were already intent on bombing the Arabs, those bombers did not actually carry out those missions. So, in other words, this actually shortened or lessened the destruction of that war. Is that correct?
Yes, it actually what it did, Mark, it prevented war. Our ship not sinking prevented World War III because that was the whole plan. Sink us, blame it on the Arabs. And back in America, people would have heard, well, the Egyptians, the Arabs went after our spy ship, most sophisticated spy ship in the world. They killed 294 men. So what do you think they would be saying in America? Go get them. They'd want oceans of blood out of the Arabs, and they would have got oceans of blood because that's exactly what we were going there for, is to get set up and sink. Our own government, from LBJ to Donald J. Trump, has not lifted a finger to get the truth out. So the powers that be in Washington, D.C., get on their knees to AIPAC, ADL for power, money, and greed. Or they've been blackmailed. Who knows? Uh, the Mossad works in very mysterious ways. A way of deception is their motto. And they almost got by with it. But the good Lord saved us, kept us afloat. That's why I'm here right now.
So those bombers were already in the air before the attack on the Liberty. Those bombers that would have enlarged the conflict evidently to World War III or close to that scale. They were already in the air when the Liberty was attacked. So they could not, they would have been lying had they said the Liberty was attacked by Arab forces and now the US is going to go make a parking lot out of Egypt. So that was the grand deception, is those planes were already in the air, and yet they would have told this cockamamie story had they sunk the Liberty.
That was the plan. That was the plan, but we didn't sink by the grace of God. I've said this over and over all my life. If it wasn't for Jesus Christ, I wouldn't be here right now. Nobody else came to help
Yeah,
us but the good Lord.
the Liberty literally acted as sort of a firewall in such a terrible, unforgivable way, and yet it sort of ended up being sort of a sacrifice, although not intended to be, to prevent a larger war. And you guys have stood your ground and told the truth no matter what. Like a pillar of iron, you won't bend to the winds of expediency. You won't bend to the winds of Israeli and greater U.S. mass media cartel, world media cartel propaganda. And as you say, all these presidents, Democrat and Republican alike, just will not offend our so-called greatest ally in the Middle East, the only democracy, which it isn't, by the way, in the Middle East. Um, Even though they have such a clear-cut reason to say at least this one time, to make that exception, to say to Israel, look, we've had your back for this, we've had your back for that, but you really went over the line here and we cannot condone this. And then there's got to be consequences, like, let's say, cutting foreign aid. In other words, the Liberty provides that clear-cut exception to the rule where Israel ought to be called out. And who would blame the who would blame the US government for at least calling Israel out on this heinous act, even if they forgave all their other perfidies and all their other corruptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, aggression. It just, this would be such a no-brainer to call the Israeli state out, and the US would have no problem justifying it. And yet they still won't do it, even to this day. That's what really floors me.
They won't do it. They're bought and paid for by APAC. Thomas Massey said here a month or so ago, maybe a couple months, that all the Republican members have a APAC handler except him, and you can just assume so do the Democrats. So they get their marching orders from Israel, not from the President of the United States, and they abide by it. They got by with cold-blooded murder of American sailors on the high seas when we didn't have a chance to fight back or anything, but with our will and our wits and wanting to live. That's all we had. But we defeated the mighty IDF and didn't fire a shot. This 2 hour bloodbath, and it seemed like every second was an hour. It was so bad.
Yes, in Virginia at the recent reunion. Describe just some of the highlights. I know that there was a 4 part or multi-part kind of mini documentary made about the Liberty. I believe Rick Wiles of True News has something to do with that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did you watch some sort of retrospective or commemorative documentary or video about the Liberty? Briefly, what did you do at the recent reunion, the 6th through the 9th of June in Norfolk, Virginia, the 58th reunion of Liberty survivors and their friends? What were some of the highlights?
One of the main highlights was we had to spend LVA, Liberty Veterans Association, had to spend $15,000 on Norfolk Police Department for security because we were getting death threats. Death threats. They didn't want us holding a reunion or talking about it. That was a huge highlight. It was a massive highlight. And we were there to remember our brothers that died that day, didn't have a chance at life. We were there to remember them and honor them. That's our only reason for getting together, is to be with each other and honor the men that were severely wounded and wounded that day and were killed, murdered by the Zionist state of Israel. Uh, but, it was just, we did not, everybody's seen Sacrificing Liberty. It's on Rumble. Just go to Rumble and search Sacrificing Liberty, and you see the whole 4 hour documentary. And Rick Wiles did a wonderful job on that documentary, a wonderful, wonderful job. If you haven't seen it, go to Rumble, download Rumble if you don't have it. You can watch Sacrificing Liberty there. But on the 7th of June, we had the ceremony at the VFW 4809, and there were 18 survivors there. As we always do, we put 34 roses. If we were in Arlington, we'd put them on the grave. This time we put them on the monument, which is, by the way, a beautiful, beautiful monument. Just gorgeous. It's made out of the same marble that all the all the monuments are in Washington, D.C. Same quarry. And I will get you those beautiful pictures. But yeah, we come there in peace and we left in peace. Thank God for the police. There wasn't any protest because they got prior word. The rabbis in Norfolk were on TV, didn't want us there. Uh, or some of the speakers, and we didn't have those speakers. The hotel and the VFW wouldn't allow our speakers because they were too controversial in telling the truth. So they weren't allowed to speak. We had uh, two men speak for us for about a little over an hour. Uh, Matt Wallach and Scotty Severs. Which way my friend Matt, he's in the hospital right now. He collapsed last Sunday, and I didn't know about it till yesterday. So he's in the hospital getting MRIs and stuff. But it was a joyous time, except for that. And, as far as I know, everybody got home safely. But our goal is to make sure that the government knows we're not going away. Nobody should be allowed to get by with cold-blooded murder, premeditated murder of American sailors and Marines on the high seas and get by with it. Especially our government that set us up. That's the whole problem, Mark. They're not going to rat themselves out that LBJ and McCain, uh, McNamara, and the rest of those clowns covered up, and also Isaac Kidd, a flag admiral, and Ward Boston. He said that this was hard to take at the end of his life, and he read a book called the Liberty Incident by A.J. Crystal, and he came out and said, "Listen, the admiral and I both know it was not a mistaken identity; it was a pre-planned murderous attack. But Johnson ordered both of them to find it was a mistaken identity within 7 days. Within 7 days, they said it was a mistaken identity, and the case was closed. And that's what they go by right now. In fact, they even say that it's been investigated by Congress over and over. They're liars. It never has been investigated. All of them are liars. They're beholden to the Zionist state. That's just a fact. It proves it every day. It proves it every day for the last 58 years. Uh, Israel got billions of dollars for murdering Americans on the high seas, and they're still getting billions of dollars. They paid $6 million for a $40 million ship. $40 million ship. I don't even think Israel paid it. I think their government did. Our government did. That's the way the things work in Washington. You toe the line or you don't get elected. And Israel is a sacred cow of all those crooks up there in Washington. All of them are crooks. They don't care about anything else but themselves.
You can comment on this briefly. This is just a brief segue. Many of us recall the late, great, very ballsy, populist, old-time Democrat from Ohio, Representative Jim Traficant. And Jim Traficant was probably the only or part of a very tiny minority on Capitol Hill that was willing to look Israel and the mass media cartel in the eye and say the Liberty was attacked on purpose by the Israeli state. And as many of us know, prior to 2009, in the early 2000s, Jim Traficant from Eastern Ohio, working class guy, used to be a sheriff. He would never carry out orders to foreclose on people's homes and knock them out of their homes. Every judge that asked him to do that when he was a sheriff, he wouldn't do it. Jim had principle, major principle, way too many principles for Capitol Hill. His own congressman tied him to a horse, strapped him to a horse, metaphorically speaking, and shot the gun straight up in the air and keel hauled him and knocked him out, not only kicked him out of Congress, but put him in prison for 7 years. And they said it was for corruption. I mean, how laughable can it be when other congressmen persecute one of their own for corruption when corruption permeates the entire institution? Would the first congressman without corruption cast the first stone, right? And so you see what happened to Traficant, and I know what happened. I knew Jim Traficant, and I would help him with columns that he wrote for American Free Press when I was a full timer there. And Jim, I believe there's different reasons he was sent up the river, but I think one of the main ones is he would not kowtow to the Israeli state no matter what, and that very definitely included the Liberty. So that's just illustrative of what happened to those very few brave souls that dared to speak out. 7 years in prison for Traficant. And you probably met Jim. If you hadn't met him, you can correct me, but I believe you met him, right? I know you knew of him in his actions.
I knew Jim very well. I talked to him on the phone. He was in his office. That was the day he brought up the USS Liberty on the House floor. And I might add that Pete McCluskey of California, and you said Dare to Speak Out. Of course, Paul Finley wrote a book about that, Dare to Speak Out. And also Cynthia McKinney brought it up. They all got run out of Congress. They never got reelected because the APAC didn't want them there for the simple reason they wanted the truth out about the USS Liberty. When they put Jim in jail, then he gets out, and then soon after that, they said he was in a tractor accident. The tractor fell over on him. Now he was a I guess you'd call him a good old boy, a good tough man, and he knew what he was doing on a tractor. So I don't know really what happened to him, but it seems awful suspicious to me. They put him in jail and then they kill him. So it all fits in one simple circle. Do not cross that line. Do not cross that big red line into APAC or the ADL or any of their surrogates, or you will no longer serve in Congress. They'll get all the money they can. They'll get somebody else to run against you, and they'll beat you. That's what happened to Paul Finley and also Cynthia McKinney and Pete McCluskey. Those are the only congressmen that were going to help us. In fact, Lauren Boebert, I'm sure you heard of her. She was my congressman here in the 3rd District of Colorado. I got a hold of her aide. I sent them letters and letters, and I finally called. They never wrote me back. They never did anything. Certified mail. I got one they even refused to pick up. I got it right here somewhere, but I got it. And I talked to her aide, and she says, Congressman Boebert will never, ever, ever help you, Phil. Never, ever, ever. She's not going to go against Israel. Or I guess she would call it her master. Because they're all controlled by their master in Israel. They're all on puppet strings. They say, where to squat. They say, we're out. And they squat. So that's our government for you. And I hate to say it, but our government is being overtaken. It is overtaken by a foreign government. They sold us out. Our own Congress from way back, 1948 and beyond, sold us out to design a state for money and profit gain and whatever else they get into, prostitution or whatever. Who knows what these people have done to our country? But we are no longer controlled by anybody but the Zionist state, and I'll go to my grave believing that.
Yes, for point of clarity, APAC, of course, is the American Israel Political Action Committee. American Israel Political Action Committee, APAC. They have a big powwow every year right in Washington, D.C. I've covered it as a reporter on the outside of the event. I could never get press credentials to go in. They would always turn me down. And it became futile to even attempt that. I didn't attempt it very much because I could sense that it just wasn't going to happen. But that is well known in very hushed tones. I've been to Capitol Hill many times. I've spent a lot of time covering Congress in person. I've talked to other reporters on the side quietly in very hushed tones. It's very well known across the board that thou shalt not speak ill of AIPAC or the state of Israel. And of course, people always make that grave, tremendous error that if you disagree with the government of Israel, the Israeli state, that somehow means you hate Jewish people, which is completely disconnected and has no bearing in reality whatsoever. But they, of course, they conflate it that way to make it look like you don't just disagree with the Israeli state, you have a problem with the Jewish people and their plight in general. And they go out and they expand that as far as they can and create this sort of dark cloud, like you say, that's hanging over our government and preventing it from acting independently. It's amazing to me that we can't even objectively say, well, due to the Israeli state's behavior, due to these rules, their foreign aid has to be cut by, let's say, 30%, as would apply to any other government in the world receiving U.S. foreign aid. They can't just join the family of nations, the Israeli state, and put on their big boy pants and act like adults and go by the same rules that any other foreign aid recipient would go by, as if that's asking too much. So they don't want their behavior in any way connected to the foreign aid policy from the U.S. to Israel, whereas any other country, any other one receiving foreign aid is going to have to toe the line and go by the rules. And that's what's truly amazing is they want this permanent special status where they don't have to answer to anyone about anything. Nothing's ever their fault. And it is a corruption that is sustaining the injustices of what went on with the Liberty. But I do think it's very fragile. You did an interview with Candace Owen that got a lot of play. I do believe we're coming to a point in time where we're beginning to see that your principles, Phil, that you're standing on and that of your survivors is beginning to erode the trust that Americans typically feel they should have toward the state of Israel. There was a recent poll by the Chicago Council on Global Affairs where it was very clear, and this is a more or less pro-Israel globalist outfit based in Chicago. It's the Chicago version of the Council on Foreign Relations. And the poll they took showed, compared to recent polls that ask very similar questions, it's showing a steady decline in the support of and the trust of Israel. In other words, more and more Americans feel that Israel should get less foreign aid, should have to be held better accountable for their actions, that they're not innocent in the Gaza affair that's going on right now. That the Palestinians are really on the receiving end of the injustices, and more Americans, according to this poll, are realizing this. So I do sense, as bad as things sound, that we're reaching, however slowly, maybe we'd like it to go faster, but I think we're reaching a turning point. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Uh, People can see it up close and personal on their phones or their computers. Uh, the devastation, the destruction, the starvation, and the bombing and the burning. For anybody that's got half a heart, can't support that. You just can't support that, and it's going on day after day after day. Now, as far as the Liberty crew, we didn't fire a shot. We didn't kill anybody, but we're called anti-Semitic, Jew haters, Nazis, anti-Semitic pigs for surviving. I'm not the whole Jewish country, the whole people there didn't attack us. It was the government. The government of this country are still covering it up, and they got more power now than they ever did for murdering Americans on the high seas. They get more access to the president. I mean, in fact, the Jewish Congress was just in Rome talking to the new Pope. I don't know if you read that or not, Mark. I'm sure you have because you're very learned about this. But the power goes all over, and I might want to mention, Mark, if that war would have started, if we think there was a Russian submarine that was ready to bomb the Temple Mount because they needed something reflective to hit it off, uh, Israel would no longer exist. That would have been it because the Russians were there. We had two subs there, the Amberjack and the Jackson. And we understand that one of them was filming the whole attack and they did nothing to help us. So that's the power. That's the power of a handful of people in government, which is spread down completely through every corner of our government, through the finances, to the munitions of giving them to Israel, the airplanes, or what they can't steal. Jonathan Pollard was one of the worst spies in the world against the United States of America. He was treated like a king when he got back. Plenty of money, nice place to live, and he's doing very well for giving secrets away to the United States, and they're still doing it. You know, there's spies all over this government stealing secrets and sending them to Israel, just like JFK. He didn't want Demona. He didn't want them to have a nuke. You know, he didn't want AIPAC to be a special interest group. He wanted them to list as a foreign agent. Guess what happened to Kennedy? November 1963. He was killed, massacred, and that was no Lee Harvey Oswald. He was just a patsy, like everybody said he was. He was a patsy, and they're covering that up. They said the Epstein files that would come out. All of it hadn't come out. JFK, that didn't come out. Martin Luther King, that hasn't come out. Junior. So where's the transparency? We've tried to write Trump and every other president from Reagan. Wrote a lot of letters to Reagan. I finally put an ad in. Washington paper cost us $7,500. It didn't cost me that. It cost Matthew Ballack that. He paid for it. I don't know if you ever met Matt, but he's a good guy. He has passed on now, but you know, it's a big full paid ad. I said, President Reagan, we still can't hear you. We can't hear you. Never got a word back. The only thing I ever got back was from Bill Clinton. It says, "Thank you for contacting my office. We want veterans to reach out to us and tell them what they want. In the letter I sent Bill Clinton, it was a very detailed, long letter of what, why, for, and how come you're still covering up. And that's the type of letter you get. You get something to smoothie over. And this should not go down in history as a mistaken identity. It was an act of war and war crimes. Did a war crime letter to the Army where it goes in 2005, and they won't even look at it, regardless if they said if it was on purpose or a mistake or whatever. They committed war crimes, and they won't even look into that. So that tells you how deep our government is into the hip pocket of the Zionist state. And you being a fine reporter as you are, Mark, you understand the inside probably a lot better than most people.
You know, what you were saying about JFK there is worth a little more emphasis. He wanted them, as best as we can understand it, to, that is, them being AIPAC, which had a different name back then. It wasn't called the American Israel Political Action Committee. It had a different name. But he wanted that entity to be a registered, not an unregistered foreign agent. And they wouldn't register. And to this day, that registration has never taken place. And it looks like, hopefully I'm wrong, but it looks like JFK was the last person that long ago to insist on that registration taking place, but it never has to this day. It's like he's the only one that was serious about registering the precursor, the predecessor organization to AIPAC.
Yes, yes. Uh, we call it IPAC. There's never an American interest in it. So IPAC, Israeli Public Affairs Committee. It's not AIPAC. It's not meant for American Israel. It's meant for Israel, period. And whatever Israel wants, they get. In fact, I don't know if you remember Thomas More, Admiral Thomas More. He's a good friend of mine. And he told me, I believe it was the Yom Kippur War. He was still chairman of the Joint Chiefs then. I mean, sure, it could have been a different war. They've had so many. But an Israeli ambassador come up to Thomas More, four-star American hero, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and said, I want this, this, and this, and this. And he says, I can't not do that without an act of Congress. And he told Admiral Moore, he says, don't you worry about Congress. I'll take care of Congress. Start loading that stuff now. And that's what they did. They got everything they wanted. So here you got the chief of Joint Chief, and the ambassador of Israel telling him what he can and cannot do. That is absurd. It's filthy. It's disgusting. Admiral Moore is one of our biggest supporters. He always has been. In fact, the Moore Report, it's on our site, libertyveterans.org, libertyveterans.org. You can go there, look at pictures, look at the Boston Report, where he said this was no mistaken identity. He recanted it. And he said we were forced to say that by the United States government. Or look at I wonder what kind of pressure they put on those men. I know what kind of pressure they put on an OE4 sailor like me. So what did they do to these people? There's no telling. Same thing with the captain. He had immense pressure put on him. At the end of his life, even before that, he had cancer, and he was more active, and he wanted. He said before Jonathan Pollard's release, do not release Jonathan Pollard, not unless you tell the American public the truth about the USS Liberty.
You're referring to Admiral Thomas Moorer, and I believe it was Moorer, Moorer, right?
Yes.
And I want to emphasize that, ladies and gentlemen, viewing this, this is the Joint Chiefs Chairman, who's now the late Thomas Moorer, right? I believe he passed away. Yeah. Here you have the Joint Chiefs Chairman, when he was alive, who was in full recognition of what happened to the Liberty. And I believe at the time he did speak out about it. He certainly stood his ground. He certainly knew what happened. And he would not bend to the winds of expediency. I mean, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So that is the total upper brass. That's just about the highest you're going to get in the U.S. Navy. that man believing and supporting, believing what happened to you and supporting you at the time, in his time, and your captain, whose name was kind of a Scottish name, I believe. I don't recall the name offhand. To approach a Joint Chiefs chairman with such arrogance, that is just really flooring. To believe that they just, could control him like a wind-up toy. That I don't know if you can overemphasize that. That is just so outrageous.
Absolutely, it's outrageous. Uh, but they got by with it. It's like they get by with everything else. Admiral Moore uh, said over and over again, I've urged the Congress over and over again to investigate this. It was not a mistaken identity. He'll never, ever believe it was a mistaken identity. Admiral Moore was a World War II hero, and he spent most of his time in the military when he was a fighter pilot or a recon pilot, scouring the oceans for ships. He could identify them all. And he says that the USS Liberty was the easiest ship in the Navy to identify with. He said it looked like a giant lobster with all the antennas and everything on it. So the idea that it was a mistaken identity is a misnomer. It was all pre-planned, probably in a year in advance, as I said earlier, to sink our old ship. Blame it on Egypt. Now this has been a world war. This could affect everybody in Europe too. It could affect the whole world. What they were going to do. Think if Russia would have used a nuke, we'd have been an all-out nuke war right then, over and over. I mean, it could have been the end. It could have been the end. But by the grace of God, it wasn't. That's why I'm here right now, telling you the truth. And yeah, what Admiral Moore, he's the number one guy, chief of naval operations, uh, and the chairman of the Chief. Uh, they treated him like that, and nobody cared. Nobody still cares. They won't even talk about the USS Liberty. That's what irritates all the survivors and their families. Is we get called bad names, and they won't recognize us. They won't talk to us. Any letters you send to them, prepare to be lied to. This has been investigated already. Forget it. We're not doing it again. They're liars. There's never been a congressional investigation. So you can't believe a word that comes out of their mouth, especially when it comes to Israel or probably everything.
Truly amazing. Your captain of the Liberty, what was his name? And describe him just briefly and what a little bit about what he went through dealing with this. We talked about Admiral Moore. Just a brief salute to your captain. Go ahead.
Yes, Captain McGonigal, very brave man, very very brave man. I saw him on the bridge in action when I was trying to put out fires on the bridge. In fact, one of my friends there, he was on the helmsman. He was a helmsman. He was killed just a few seconds after I left. Got back up there and he was dead on the deck. But Captain McGonigal received the Medal of Honor uh, for his heroic action, and he was a hero. He deserved the Medal of Honor. He deserved the Medal of Honor in all respects, and everybody respects him. But he was wounded. He stayed on the bridge. He never left the bridge. They would just give him, but he was getting more coffee put down on anything. Uh, and he never left that bridge. He was brave, brave, brave man, and he got our ship out of there somehow by the grace of God. And he's buried in Arlington right now, right on a hill above the mass grave in Arlington. There's 6 men there in that grave that couldn't be identified. They just got their names, and who knows if they're even in there or not. I don't know, but their names are. At least we can remember them that way. Uh, during the horrible attack, 2 Marines were killed. The CIA, NSA guy was killed. 25 old total 25 spies killed, and 9 crew members, 34 and 174 wounded. Some so badly you couldn't even hardly look at him. It was so sad. It was just unbelievable. But yes, our captain deserves all the credit. And he came out later in life and he told George Golden this, my division officer. He says, George, they bought me. They bought me off. They made me shut up. They made me quiet. And he was crying when he told George Golden that soon after he passed away.
This is truly a amazing and in some ways, many ways, heartbreaking story. And yet we can take some solace in the fact that the Liberty survivors are still meeting. They know the truth. They refuse to bend. We know public opinion, however slowly, is starting to turn a more logical, rational direction, a more truthful direction. You, by all indications, prevented a much larger war, although unintentionally, from happening. And so, in that strange way that maybe only the good Lord understands and knows, of course, it was good in that it prevented a larger conflict, yet you had to bear the total brunt of this. But the final observation, at least one of my summaries here as we wind up, is that this is without a doubt, and I can't think of anything that would surpass it. This is without a doubt the most sensitive piece of information that, if it were more widely known, if it were more widely understood, reaching that 100th monkey, as they call it, that threshold where when enough people know something, almost everybody knows it. They call that the 100th monkey syndrome, or 100th monkey phenomenon, you might say. If this reached a critical mass, a sufficiently critical mass of public knowledge, it would have an irreversible effect, I believe, on American public opinion toward the state of Israel. Not against Jews in general, it's not that, against the state of Israel. And the powers that be know this, and this, in my mind, is the only understandable explanation for why they go to such lengths to keep a lid on this, because if it gets out enough, there's no turning back. The proverbial toothpaste cannot be put back in the tube, and they know it. And yet you guys refuse to bow, you refuse to be quiet about it, and the tide is turning. It's just a matter of time, but I think that's what it boils down to. If this got out enough, there'd be no turning back, and the entire relationship with the state of Israel would be permanently changed. That's the way I see it.
Well, you see it right through my eyes too, Mark. That's exactly right. And this cover up is so pervasive and so crooked and so bad. The reason we keep on speaking out is our brothers were murdered that day in cold blood. In cold blood, they can't speak for themselves, but we can speak, and I'm going to speak for them as long as I can till I'm dead. I'm not giving this fight up. In fact, I'm starting my own podcast. Starting this week, it's the Tourney podcast. It'll be on X and Rumble and all the other outlets we can get on. TikTok, we'll do short pieces there. But we're going to have guests, the survivors that want to come on board and get on the podcast. You're going to hear things so horrific that's never even been told before. That's how bad it's going to be, or good, actually. Good for America to hear this. What they've done and what they've done to lives. I mean, a lot of these guys are suffering so bad. One of my shipmates, a dear friend of mine, Don Pagler, he's been holding this with him for years. He's had high blood pressure. Finally, his eyes popped. He's blind now and sick. We're losing survivors 4 or 5 a year, every year, 4 or 5 a year or more. So what we're doing is a noble cause. I do it because I believe in Jesus Christ as my Savior, and He's my protection. He was then and He is now. So America, the world's got to wake up. Europe, I think, is probably a little bit more understanding, or maybe they're not. I don't know. I would hope so. But certainly in the United States, none of the media, ABC, NBC, CBS, all the mainstream media, they wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole. But alternative media such as this, that's the way to go, because people can pick up on it and learn things they'd never learned before. So we're going to blow the lid completely off this cover up once and for all. That's our goal. At least that's my goal.
That's right. And the alternative media UK column, being among the leaders, seeks, of course, to definitely challenge the dominance ultimately of the legacy media cartel, as I call them. Anyway, Phil Tourney, I believe we can wind it up there. I'm glad that your 58th reunion in Norfolk, Virginia wound up successfully, despite some of the threats that you experienced. And thanks for being with me today. I suspect there could be an accompanying article with this video at some point. We'll see what other developments come out. But again, thanks, Phil Tourney, USS Liberty survivor, for joining me here on UK Column. And you have a great day.
You as well, Mark. Thank you so much. God bless you, sir. May peace be on all of us. And let's get this out. We can't do it alone. We need you, Mark. We need you bad. We need everybody. Let's knock this out once and for all. We can't be controlled by a foreign government. So thank you, sir. I appreciate it.